guys, welcome back to the Bill and Rae Show. I'm out here making another marble, and today I'm going to use some frit layers and some impressions with the Florist Frog to do a kind of pattern that I did this years ago, but I haven't done too many of them. Maybe I've made a video similar to this on these marble builds, but everyone's going to be different, so we're going to launch into this. We're going to make a little center plunge fumed element first. So I'm going to start out using some of this yellow transparent color, this Chinese yellow. Don't use much China glass, but this is one that's kind of basic and seems to be a pretty solid glass. So I need to pull out a little stinger. So just heat up the end here, grab it with a punty. Okay, we just pull up a little short section. It's not going to be much. And then you can see better what's going on here. Try and take off this end. Get back to some clean glass, and we'll try and get a little bullet end here. That should do the trick. So then we're just going to throw some silver at this. Now, you do want it fairly straight. So that's all there is to that point. I'll leave this out here. Okay. Trying to figure out what's going on next. We're going to go into our main construction rod as we throw some shrapnel around. Clean this up and make a gather so that we have something to plunge into. Well, I invite everybody to ditch the doom scrolling and check out some art, do some crafts. Everybody can do something creative. Spend a little time doing some self-care. We appreciate anybody that's stopping in and checking out these videos. I don't get very many comments though. I wish people would drop a note in the comments. It helps out the channel. Give a thumbs up. All that stuff really helps us out. As usual, I'm just trying to get a starting point here. In a lot of ways, this is going to be a pretty straightforward construction, but there's a lot of different steps, different layers. Every one will affect how this turns out. And along the way, I generally, when I'm doing marbles like this, I come up with individual steps that I'll kind of critique as I go. It's like, oh, should have done more or less of this, should have done this order, that order. Next time. but next time isn't necessarily anytime soon, so I will have forgotten whatever I thought I was going to do next time by the time next time comes around. But that's one thing that I've been enjoying about doing these videos is it lets me go back and see what I did. And this week I didn't go back and look at any prior videos. I just thought of this one. Like I say, it's a pattern that I've done a few of over the years. We'll see if we can create something cool. So, step one, get a little ball superheated. I'm going to try and do some flipping around of cameras. This is going to be kind of hard to see. Try and get some really hot glass. Come up here and kind of stabilize it, and then plunge in here. Now, anytime you do a plunge like that, you're going to wind up pulling some air up in there. So we'll try and heat up this mass and give it a chance to clean itself up. Now, as much as I try and make that plunge on center, it's never, well, once in a while it's on center, but it will wind up being a little bit of a corkscrew effect in this next little bit. And as typical, I got one little bubble up here on the front. I like it when it's totally clean, free of bubbles, but that kind of rarely happens, so. And sometimes at this point, if it just looks disaster, I can just like rip all that glass away and start over, but we're just going to keep rolling. Okay, that's kind of closed in. Let's see, where are we going to go here? So we're going to start forming up our cone. So this is kind of elongating, cone out. Shaping this up. And I'm actually trying to drag this to get some twirl to it. Hopefully you can kind of see what's inside there. This little fumed funnel. And then we'll pull this end off. Okay, well that's a decent starting point. So what are we going to do here? We're going to do a bunch of layers of frit. And start off with red. Try and do kind of a gentle flame here. Try and get this nice and saturated heat. Come in here and do a simple roll. Okay, then we're going to kind of go out. Get the right shot here. Keep some good rotation and try and heat that red in with the minimum fizzy effect. Kind of missing a little bit on the tip here. Okay. So like I say, we're going to do a couple layers here. So the next one we're going to do is some Andromeda frit. So we need this hot enough to pick up frit. See if we can multitask a bit here. Andromeda is a little bit sparkly. But in a deep encasement sort of situation like this, it's going to have some kind of almost silver fume effect. Alright, who's up next? Do some Lapis. I don't have very much of this glass left, but it's a nice intense blue. Now this layer, I think I want a little bit more dense. So we're going to come in here several times. Okay, that's somewhat of a darker layer. It's still pretty open, kind of an open weave here, but it's getting a little bit more saturated. So I've got black that I want to put on. I wasn't sure how much this was going to build up to this point. I thought it might be a bit more opaque by now. I can still see through it pretty much. Okay, well, got some color down. So I guess I'm going to go into doing some black. A little more aggressive flame. This is, like I say, all these different layers where I think, should I do this? Should I do that? Should I do more of this or less of that? There's so many variables that happen in this kind of a build. It will all affect the outcome. So I kind of expect that this will not be a completely solid marble in the sense that you're going to have some light coming through the backside in this finished marble. So most marbles I do, I try and actually make an opaque solid interior so you don't get light coming through. But in this particular design, we're going to accept the fact that some light's coming through the back. Okay, we'll put this aside. So we still got to cook all this color in before we move forward. And we can introduce the other element of this project. You can find it. Oh, because I don't have it in the right place, that's why. Okay, let's try this again. I'm going to put this out here. So this is our florist frog we're going to use in the next phase. And I've got it in a vise to give it some heft, because when I press into it, the worst case scenario is you get the glass stuck to it. Then you've got kind of a disaster. So hopefully that won't happen. Okay, I think I've got this frit pretty well cooked in. So the next step is kind of the whole key to this particular marble. We're going to try and make impressions on 3 sides. And to do that, we need the core to be pretty stable. So the idea here is to heat up one section at a time. And how much we heat it up, that's kind of a mystery part of this process. I want it pretty hot. We're going to go into our frog, and we're going to push pretty hard. And come up with this crazy skin pattern. And between these shots, we need to put some wax on our frog so we don't stick to it. So we have to sort of arbitrarily figure out where it is a third of the way around. Okay. Make sure we throw on some wax. And now this one is a little more obvious because you just do the opposite from the pointed pinched end. Okay, one more shot at it. And I'm putting some real pressure on that. So now we wind up with a three-sided textured pattern. Get all this stuff out of my way. So this phase we want to melt in these sides. There's going to be some air trap involved in this process, and that's all right. I'll throw some good heat into it. So some of these little push pin pricks will collapse and squeeze the air out, and some won't. So we want to actually keep our shape, keep working on a triangular shape here. And also kind of keep our shoulder more or less round. So those layers of color, they get all pushed up in there, and well, you see in the finished marble what happens. They get kind of mixed and spread, and I think it's a pretty interesting effect, the way those color layers will be manipulated. Okay, I think this is pretty well settled down. So again, we'll try and get that core to stabilize. We'll kind of focus our heat into the individual faces to settle it down. We'll check our reflections to see how we're doing. We really want these to be smoothed out before we go to the next step, is going to be adding clear. Actually, before we add clear, we're going to do some fume. Alright, I think we're just going to do some silver. pretty heavy fume there. Okay, we're going to start filling in the backside, but because we've got a dimensional piece here now, we want to actually work with that crazy three-sided interior. So we're going to try and fill in the flats first. I'm going to be working with kind of this idea that color and clear have kind of a barrier property when they're on the surface. So you can kind of add clear as a dimensional control agent. One characteristic of this marble design is it grows a lot in size from the origin cone because of all these layers of clear that gets built up. So I don't know if I've done this process before with this marble design. This is the one area that I might be kind of changing it up from what I've done before because I'm avoiding the edges. I'm just kind of working on these flats. Okay, over the edge there. So the idea is to leave those edges exposed, so when this starts melting in, it'll continue to sort of amplify that triangular shape. Get this rounding up started. As often I mention that some stages of the marble process can look like a mess. That's okay. So now I'm trying to kind of focus the heat on these flat areas, get them to melt in, get this a little overheated here. Some gentle coaxing there to get it a little more round. Trying to get it fairly round here. And then again, we're going to have to set this down and let it settle in. Yeah, I got my Vortex marble diagram on my mug. We have a lot of merch down in the description below for t-shirts and mugs and things with different designs Rae's come up with. I kind of came up with this design. Kind of shows the difference between Rae's work and my work. It can be a little bit more technical, analytical oriented. Okay, so we got this thing kind of shaped up. But we want to make sure we have a layer of clear across the whole thing so that when we do our backside color and raking and so on, we don't disturb the interior. So we're going to proceed to add a layer of clear. So take this opportunity to thank our sponsor, Epicwater Filters. We've got a link in the description below where you can go to their site and look at different water filter options. They make a really good quality unit. There are various different types. We've got the pitcher in our refrigerator. They use a medical grade plastic. It's just beautiful, nice, heavy duty, clear plastic. The one we've got has got the bamboo handle, which is kind of cool. And we've really enjoyed our water filter. So if you get on there and you make a purchase, we get a small bit of that to help support the channel. You can also support us just giving us a thumbs up and leaving a comment. We don't get very many comments. It would help the channel if we get some more comments. So if you're enjoying this content and you want to see more of it, help us out. You don't have to get very flamboyant with a comment. You can just say thanks. Or this part confuses me. What's going on? Okay, this guy's getting a little short. Yeah, it's nice to get out here in the torch shop and get away from the doom scrolling and just focus on making something cool. Doing what human beings are good at. I don't use AI to help me in the process or in the production of the videos, and I'm not like anti-AI or something, but just to point out that this is all just me in charge of the recording, in charge of the material, in charge of the editing. But I couldn't do it without the support of my loving wife, Rae, and all her creative ability. Keep our family going. We're a team. Okay, I'm going to come back here a little bit, add some more. This is all, adding glass like this is all part of the process of affecting the optics by affecting the dimensions. Dimensions, proportions, configurations, whatever it is we're doing here. It's to change what it looks like on the inside. So we created our triangular shape, and we hopefully kind of enhance that shaping with some clear glass just on the flat faces. And then this is enveloping the whole pattern, kind of constrict it down into the core of the marble. I'm not saying there's any right or wrong way to do this. It's just these things will affect the outcome. So now we can kick some heat in here and allow that glass to move on its own. Kind of dark outside. We had some beautiful days. Last 2 days. It started raining late yesterday, I guess. But a couple days there, started getting out and doing some yard work. Took down a couple of trees in the yard, some poplars that were, I got those planted in many years ago. I was looking for some fast-growing trees to provide some shade and not block the view too much, because they're a tall, vertical kind of tree. But I don't like our cold winters or whatever it is. So most of them in the area you see, they're kind of 1/3 dead parts. They keep going, but these had never really done very well here, and I finally got around to taking those down. It's kind of nice to get that done with. It's one of those things that I fire up a very old chainsaw. These were not big trees, but little trees are actually problematic because they decide to go some direction you don't want them to sometimes. Just like this marble is going directions I don't really want it to, but gotta keep rolling, keep going, keep going. And then this is kind of a pruning season. It's just been a crazy mild winter, so we're already kind of into spring, quite a ways ahead of the game. And so there's a lot of pruning that needs to happen already. And yesterday I got out in my greenhouse and started cleaning up from last year's plants and start working on the soil for this coming year. I've been mixing it up these days, not just out here torching all the time. Trying to work on this lens part right now, just kind of beefing up so we don't have such a little delicate connection between the bulk of the marble. I mean, this kind of looks like a marble right now, but it's only sort of half the marble. The lens is the other half. Another phase where it's probably best to give it a moment. Give the glass a moment, give myself a moment. Well, so far it's going good. I like this. So again, I don't look at a ton of other people's glass work, but I haven't seen anything like this out there in the glass world. If you're out there and you make something just like this, let me know. I'd love to see someone else's take on this idea. And this adventure for me all started many years ago. I mentioned this before, I'll say it again, doing the Saturday market in Missoula, which is like 50 miles up north of us. And I started making some marbles. Well, I'd made some marbles for years, but started making some borosilicate marbles. Started getting into the gold and silver fuming concepts. And I had a customer in Missoula. Wish I knew his name. Love to hear from him again. But he started stopping by like every other week, and he wanted to know, what's new? What do you got? And we went through that season at market, and I'd have several new marbles, and I'd usually sell like 3 of them every other week to this one customer. And it just really kind of kept me on my toes. It's like, I got to come up with something new. Next couple of weeks, he's going to come back around looking, he's going to expect something new. I had to figure out, what am I going to do that's going to be different? So that was kind of my origins of really kind of working hard to create some unique concepts in glass. And of course, everything kind of grows in scale, so I don't know how big they were when I was making those, but quite a bit smaller than these. The mass of the glass goes up geometrically from the diameter, so a marble that's 1.5 inches is a whole lot less glass than a marble that's 2 inches. At any rate, he was very enthusiastic of my work, and I really appreciated he inspired me to keep going. Without wonderful customers, artists would not be able to do what they do. So this design, it still winds up being kind of this wavy, lumpy, bumpy. And visually, of course, as you rotate it, it's hard to focus just on the silhouette. Is the silhouette round? Is the silhouette all lumpy, bumpy? Or is it just visually looking into it? So I think we're close enough to keep moving. We're going to go on to some color lines on the back side. And we'll start with Silver Strike 5. Come up here to our artificial horizon. Seems a little sluggish there. Crank it up just a notch. Yeah, the only kind of downside using some of the red, orange, yellow kind of colors is you can't see the color correctly until it comes out of the kiln the next day. So as long as it's hot, it's just very dark and doesn't really exhibit color. So this one's going to be a fun surprise in the morning to see what we came up with. All right, I was going to put this dark cobalt away, and I thought, oh, I would use dark cobalt on the back side. uh, in a long time, maybe never, I don't know. Surely I've used it before. I can't think of when. Well, I think we managed to make this fairly opaque, actually. I was afraid it was going to be kind of an open, lacy situation, but and if nothing else, that fuming on that black frit will create kind of a visual barrier on the inside outside, depending on the lighting. Okay, last but not least, my favorite. Can you guess? It's sparkly, it's blue, it's unobtanium. So like I said, I was going to put that blue cobalt, dark cobalt away. I thought, oh, I should use that. And then I thought, well, it would be nice to contrast that with Silver Strike 5, which is kind of my lazy default. Yeah, okay, that'll work. And then I was like, well, okay, I need a third color, which I don't. I mean, I could make this pattern with one color or two colors or five colors or whatever. I thought, okay, what else? What's another color I could put in here? And I wasn't really inspired by anything particular. I sort of thought about green, and I thought, you know, I'm just going to go back to Unobtanium. Here we go. That is that. And I got a few little bubbly spots from that Unobtanium, but we'll see. We'll cook that in. It usually doesn't amount to anything once it's cooked in and raked out. So those kind of little bubbles will go away. Yeah, it feels good to be out here at the torch shop, and I would say chilling, but it's not very cold. It's pretty toasty. Get some tunes going on the headphones and just kind of relax and get into the rhythm of glass. I don't know. I think it looks pretty cool, but maybe it's just psychedelic 60s kind of mindset. Okay, we're going to jump into raking here in a minute. Okay. This is the part where I pray to the glass gods to treat me nice, to be kind. Okay, come back to the beginning. I'll come up here and take a little turn. Stick there for a moment while I heat up this run down to the point. And back up pretty close to that run. And that worked smooth as silk. We're not exactly on center. It's a little hard to tell where center is at. So kind of leave that alone for a bit. Try and find where we started, because there's always kind of a breakaway in the first little bit. It seems like the tungsten pick has to get a little bit of glass on it, and then the glass-to-glass interaction is more predictable. So a lot of times when I heat this up, I can see through those color lines and figure out where the actual end point is at. Get an idea of whether I'm on the right focal point. It doesn't matter a whole ton, but it's nice when those things line up. I'm not getting a whole lot of visual cues, but I think it's at the right spot pretty much. So we'll leave it alone. Okay, melt in those raked lines. Those all blended. All right, getting ready for punty time. Okay, spend a little bit of time with the Lynx flame, get this process started. You may or may not be able to see there's various bits and bobs in there that shouldn't be there. So that'll get ripped out in a couple minutes. But ideally, a good bit of this first stage of glass that's got some contamination and a bit of fuming maybe, and a bunch of yanking around, twisting and turning. And condense that glass up and push it out to kind of a little raised bump where we can peel it off. But because you can't heat it from the inside out, some of that stuff gets basically melted in and embedded deeper into the glass. Okay, just condensing away here, building up that clear lens. It requires quite a lot of glass to make this lens. And you want excess glass that I will be removing. Yeah, well, I'm glad I chose this design for today. This is been a good little interaction. The crackle from the torch, it's not super happy with the oxygen balance right there. It's kind of a game of proportions here to see how much glass we need to bring into the marble. I'll call it good. Yeah, this is a Don't always do this part of trying to get that extra glass sticking out to pull in. Okay. Now for the rip-torn part. So some people have issues with the hot glass sticking to their tweezers, which we all do. One thing I kind of figured out is leave your tweezers in the water until you're ready to use them. Because if you just dip them in the water and bring them out of the water, that water is going to evaporate right away and you're back to bare metal. But if you kind of bring it to bear quickly, that residual water creates a little barrier of steam between the steel and the glass. It usually works pretty good. Yeah, so this was a lot of layers of frit. And hopefully that combination stacked up and then being pushed into the interior kind of distorts those layers and exposes parts of the background layer. You get a little bit of a mechanical mixing. So I think most people would call this skimming the glass. I'm just removing a thin layer off the top, off the surface. It helps to kind of brace your arm when you're doing stuff like this. You don't want to be straining too much when you're doing glass work. Although some of it is fairly physical, you want to try and figure out how to do it so it's comfortable. Whether you're doing glass work or whatever you're doing, just remember to breathe. Keep breathing. Sometimes you need to do some focused breathing. If you don't know about box breathing or any of these other breath techniques, it's definitely worth checking out. I have a tendency in certain circumstances to develop some anxiety that I'm not really all that aware of. And something like box breathing is a great way to clear out some anxiety. We're coming into the final stretch of any manipulations of color or clear, and all the rest from this point on is just shaping. No, I just did there when I turned on the Red Max torch and it goes pop. It has a tendency to throw little sparklers, little bits of carbon generally. And it's really best to keep your glass out of the way when it does that. And I didn't see anything stick. Sometimes if the glass isn't very hot, it won't stick. Alright, I've got a couple of juggling acts to do here. We've got this plate here that we had the frit on, covering up our oversized marble mold. So we get going with this with slow rotations and let that front lens kind of condense down from the egg shape to a rounder shape, and then I like to use this rapid spinning. Kind of pulls that glass down and out. It's got a really nice egg shape right now. We're looking for something rounder than egg shape. I do like to use the L marver to square things up along that transition zone. It keeps things looking sharp. And we can angle that clear glass into the fire and try and push some heat down inside the core. Okay, we're getting a little bit more flattened end, so I'll go into the oversized mold, hit that edge and kind of push into it. Hit that edge again. A lot of this kind of just wiggling things around, trying to shape them up. And we'll go into this 2-inch mold. And push into it a bit. Little by little. But you want to keep kind of course correcting to keep it symmetrical, I guess, if you think of it. Yeah, maybe we just kind of allow for that front lens to be exaggerated a little bit, little flattened in and squished out. And I'll stick a punty on here to transfer this over. And unfortunately, a lot of these steps, you have to let it cool down enough to maintain control. But you unfortunately kind of lose your heat base, so the next step is putting that heat back in. But you can't really punty onto molten glass. It's got to be somewhat stable. So the color kind of rejects the heat a lot more than the clear. Basically, anytime you see that glass glowing really bright, it's throwing off heat. Instead of penetrating in, it's just rejecting it. With slow rotations kind of help to force that heat into the glass. And I can try some rotations. It might not be hot enough to really do much. A little peek at the kiln, make sure the temperature is set right. Okay, we wind up with kind of this valley in the color zone towards the transition. So that's what we kind of work through. We're going to go into the marble mold level and try and Start coaxing those two halves together. I left that end. That end is kind of bumped out there, trying to preserve the depth. So if you make mechanical moves and then you let the glass just heat and move on its own, it'll be much more natural looking. An oversized mold and start pushing that end in. As we raise our punchy to a vertical position, then we're applying some pressure to and squeeze those two halves together. Getting a little toasty now. When I push with the punty into the marble mold, I'm kind of flattening that lens face. So you kind of hang it straight down and pull that lens back out. Yeah, that central plunge didn't wind up coming up into the center very far. That's cool. Sometimes it comes all the way up in there. I just wanted something to sort of have your eye focus on something in the interior. It's kind of a classic element to put in there. And we get pretty close to the final shape overall, so we can lose some core heat. And start focusing a bit more just on the surface. Trying to look at the reflections. We've got a little bit of wobbles here and there, just along that edge, that transition edge. Trying to be more careful going into the marble mold when you get closer to the end. I think that's pretty reasonable. So this is just kind of a heat cycle to flame polish. Okay, I think that's pretty good. So we'll just continue to rotate and let that settle down to do our final anti-transfer. Alrighty, got a little bullet nose on here. Looking good. Make sure we remove any trace of that funky connection there. Slowly heat this end up. It's a little flattened. I can just see it visually. It's a little flattened on this end, so I need to get that glass to pull out a little. And I see a bright spot. Every time you see a bright spot in there, I might as well get rid of it sooner than later. It's not going to go away. Okay, this clear is going to move a lot faster. fairly wibbly wobbly, so we're trying to come into this marble mold with the back side, touching down first, maybe gently lower it down in there. And rotating in just one direction, and it helps minimize some of the ripples and anomalies. So that's kind of the first rough pass. This time we want some faster rotations. And again, we kind of lose some heat in the core. And when we do a reheat, we're just heating up the surface. This is a phase. It's a little more controlled than a marble this size torch and so on. You know, people tend to get going at this phase and their glass is too hot. When you have trouble rounding things up, your glass is too hot. Generally, that's what's going on. It's just out of control. You've got to have at least part of it firmly in control as kind of your guide. And then you get a sense of feel. You can feel it when it's rotating in that marble mold. It's nice and smooth. Now the very front face of this has got some ripples. It kind of doesn't fully fill out. But it's pretty close, so at this phase we're just going to do some heat cycling. In these cycles, you want to really be sure you don't overheat. So you're just letting that glass flex. So heat up, cool down, heat up, cool down. As it does that, it wants to keep making a smoother surface. Throwing a lot of heat into that very front face, and can angle back to this transition area. And that starts getting it nice and round. I think we've got it. Well, whether anybody likes it or not, that's their own personal judgment. I accomplished the marble that I set out to accomplish today, so it's a big win for me. The back is beautiful. There's really no issues with that backside. Okay, it's cooled down enough. Let's see if we can get this off of here successfully. So just kind of give it some time, get out a little ways out in the flame. A little bit of a black spot there. And bounce the flame around some. And you could fiddle with this a little bit. Another one of those things to heat it up, cool it down, let it spin over. So you see very, very little ripples. All right, guys, we made it. Awesome. And the tweezers are wet. Don't want to hit it with wet tweezers. I don't know. It's pretty crazy, but it's cool. It's what I wanted. Like I say, it's a success in my mind. Get it in the kiln here. I can get on with the day and start editing this video so you can see it. So right up coming next is a video clip of the finished marble. And we wish you all the very best. Take care of yourselves. Take care of those around you and enjoy your life. And we will see you on another adventure next time. Check it out.